Hi, Dale coming to you from my garage again, and this project is the third and last project for my wife that I have hurried to get done before school started. This project, it's a double-sided, on casters, magnetic whiteboard. But I'm not going to use just any old whiteboard material. I'm going to use plexiglass as the whiteboard media. I think it's better, and well, I know it's better, and that's what I'm going to use. So let's get started. I'll show you how I built it. The first step is to cross-cut the whiteboard frame pieces to rough length and rip them to the desired width. I'm cutting them a bit long so that I can trim them to their exact size later. I'm using select pine boards from a big box store because I could not find any of the super cheap pine boards that were even remotely straight. These select pine boards are generally very easy to find straight with no knots and are still pretty inexpensive. The nice thing about using plexiglass is that you can use normal tools to cut it. It's always a good idea to use painter's tape on both sides of the plexiglass where you'll be cutting. This really helps with making a clean cut. Also, please wear good eye protection and a dust mask when working with plexiglass. The first thing I do is cut my large sheet in half so I have two smaller pieces. Next, I tape the two pieces together and trim them at the same time so I'll come out having two sheets the same size. I only have very rough measurements at this time. Once both pieces of plexiglass are trimmed to the same size, I'll build everything else off of these measurements. I'm going to be sliding the whiteboard into dados cut into the frame. I need the dado to be wide enough for two pieces of plexiglass and a piece of galvanized sheet metal. I want it to be a fairly snug fit, but not so tight that I have to struggle to get the whiteboard inside the dado. It takes two passes on my table saw to get the correct thickness. I set the fence so that it is just a hair less than 1/8 of an inch off the middle of the board. This allows me to simply flip the board left to right for the second pass through the table saw. I do this on all four sides of the frame. Don't worry that the cuts show on the ends of the boards. Those will be covered up later. Now is the time to mark and cut the galvanized sheet metal to the same size as the plexiglass. You need to make sure you're not using aluminum or aluminium for my Aussie and English friends, as we need this to be magnetic. I was not sure if I could use my table saw or circular saw to cut galvanized sheet metal, so I went with hand tools. This was actually a lot of work. I'm not sure if I had the right tool for cutting the metal or if the tool was junk. Either way, when I finished, I felt my arm should have looked like this. Also, I forgot to mention my goal is to have a completely customizable whiteboard where my wife will be able to change out the background however she wants. Maybe all white one day, black the next, a winter theme, grids, anything she wants. I'm doing a quick test fit to make sure the sheet metal sandwiched between the two sheets of plexiglass fit into the dado I cut earlier. A much smarter thing to do would have been to cut the plexiglass and sheet metal first, then use a test board to cut the dado to make sure the dado was the same size. I'm really glad my calculations were correct, and this fits perfect. I can now assemble the frame around the whiteboard and mark for final size of the frame. Once marked, I simply use my cross-cut sled, which I made in an earlier video, to cut the final size. I'm going to use simple butt joints for the whiteboard frame. I'm going to connect them using a screw through the stile and into the rails. That is, I'll insert a screw through the sides and into the top and bottom. I first pre-drill countersink holes on the top and bottom of each side piece. The holes will be covered when I add a top piece, bottom tray, and side legs, which will also ultimately add a lot of strength to the whiteboard. Okay, I do have some more work to do on the frame, but before I move toward that, I want to get some paint on these plexiglass dry erase boards so that they have plenty of time to dry. I mentioned earlier that I have moved away from building a completely customizable dry erase board, mainly because of time. I just was not having enough time to work on it, and my wife was going to need this to start school. So I went with a much simpler design, which you're watching, and it is not going to be configurable. It's going to be just solid color. So I asked her what color she wants. She wants white on both sides. I wanted to show you one thing that I did do to give my wife a little bit of choice on what she wanted to have. Was I took the whiteboard, and here's a sample that I've done, and the first thing I did, the paint is on the back side here. This is the dry erase side. And so what I did was on the back side here, I took my straight edge and I drew with a black Sharpie grid lines. Now for a test, I use a thicker Sharpie, a thinner, a medium. I use different thicknesses of Sharpies so I could kind of mark it out to see what it would look like and which would be best. Then I simply covered the entire back with a white paint, let it dry, and when it comes out, you can see that the grid, it shows really, really well. In the bottom half, I have just white. My wife has chosen that she just wants to go all white on both sides of the whiteboard. She doesn't want the grid, but I wanted to show you it's very easy to do, comes out really well. Also, I can show you that this media just works so much better as a dry erase media. It goes on and then comes off just perfect. You can see that it leaves no marks like a whiteboard does. You don't have to worry about getting any kind of special cleaner. You don't have to worry about getting the magic erasers. It just goes on real smooth and it comes off just as easy. It's just a better media for a dry erase board. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and paint the backs of these plexiglass dry erase boards. While they dry, I can move on to finish the frame. When I painted my test piece, I noticed the paint took a bit longer to dry than normal, and it definitely needs 2 or 3 coats. Nothing magic about this. Remove the plastic from the back side only of each piece of plexiglass and slap on a bunch of paint. Once the paint has dried on both pieces of plexiglass, we sandwich the galvanized sheet metal between them. Make sure that the painted sides are in against the sheet metal. Notice that I still have the plastic on the outside of the plexiglass. I don't peel that off until the very end. This will help protect it from scratches and me getting paint on it when I do the final painting of the frame. It's now time to do the final assembly of the frame around the whiteboard. Notice that I peeled back the plastic just enough to allow me to slide on the frame. I slide each piece of the frame onto the whiteboard, making sure that both pieces of plexiglass and the sheet metal stay aligned and set nicely in each dado. Once all sides are on, it really makes the plexiglass extremely rigid, which is exactly what we're looking for. The single screw is really all you need and is plenty strong enough, but this will become even stronger once the rest of the whiteboard is attached. With the frame now complete, it's on to making the legs and feet. I ripped 2 6-foot boards to width for the legs. I then cross-cut sections of boards to make up the feet. Using one board, what will become the feet, I center and square the 6-foot leg. I mark the edges of the leg on the foot. I transfer those marks to the second of 3 boards which will make up the foot and cross-cut on those markings. The leg will slide in between the shortened boards. This is confusing right now, but will make sense in a couple seconds. With the leg clamped into place, squared and centered on the first board of the foot, I glue and clamp the shortened boards I just cut into place. Make sure you remove the leg after clamping and clean up any glue squeeze out that gets onto the middle of the first board. After the glue has had plenty of time to dry, do the same thing on the other side of the foot. Make sure the leg is square, glue and clamp the other side down just like the first, and finally clean up any glue squeeze out from the middle of the bottom board. Attaching the final piece of the foot is easy. Simply glue and clamp the third of 3 boards to complete the foot. What you have created is a slot the leg will slide down into. Repeat all of these steps again using the other leg for the second foot. Once the glue is dried, I use my table saw to cut a nice clean edge on each foot. It's going to be much easier to attach the casters to the feet now rather than after everything is assembled. So save yourself some trouble and attach them to the feet now. Spread glue inside the slot on all 4 sides and insert the leg. Make sure you insert it all the way to the bottom. Make sure it is nice and square. Pre-drill 2 countersunk holes and finally secure with 2 screws. Repeat this on the other leg. Cut an 8-inch wide board to length for the bottom tray. Then drill pocket holes on both sides of the tray as well as the top piece. We will be attaching the top piece and the tray to the legs with these pocket holes. Cut a 1-inch wide board to the same length as the bottom tray. Then rip that board in half. We'll be using these small strips as a lip on the tray to keep the dry erase markers from rolling off. Set up your clamps to glue both lips on the tray. Glue 1 lip on each side of the tray. Clamp and let dry. Pre-drill countersunk holes into the top piece. Apply glue and screw down the top piece to the frame. Attach each leg exactly the same as you attach the top. Start by pre-drilling countersunk holes in the legs, apply an even coat of glue on the whiteboard frame, then secure each leg to the frame with screws. Use clamps to help hold the legs in place during this step. And 1 more round of pre-drilling countersunk holes, applying glue and screws, this time to the bottom tray. Only 1 more step to complete the assembly, and that is attaching the top piece and the tray to the legs. I do this with pocket screws in the pocket holes I drilled earlier. Construction is now complete. It's time to make it look pretty. My wife wanted the whiteboard to be white with black frame, so that's what she's gonna get. I had both white paint and black paint, so I didn't have to go buy any more, which was nice. Have I ever told you guys that I really don't like to paint?
Okay, here we go after a couple of coats of paint. It's really taking shape, it's looking good. The only thing left is to pull off the plastic. And speaking a little bit about painting and painters, I've been lucky enough to go to France and visit the Louvre. You can't help but be inspired by the great artist's works. When you see Impressionism, you think Monet. Van Gogh, he did Post-Impressionism. Picasso invented collage. I, my friends, am also a student of a particular style of painting. I'm a student in the style of glob and drip. Don't you hate it when you thought you were done with a project, but then you turn around and you look at it and you see, oh no, I forgot something. I forgot something. My wife, she's going to use the whiteboard. You can spin it. Double-sided. I just have to take the plastic off still. But one key place that I really missed was she also uses flip boards or flip sheets where she wants to be able to hang it here, right, flip them over. So she needs a place to hang it. And I forgot all about that. I would have done this well before putting everything together. So I'm going to use this 1/4-inch dowel. I'm going to drill a hole here and a hole over here. Stick it through so it sticks out on either side 1 inch so that she'll be able to hang flip boards up there. Once I put it in, I'll glue it in, I'll give it a paint black. At that point, we will be done. So let's get working on that.
You can't see it from this angle, but I clamped a piece of scrap to the other side to prevent blowout. I also added some painter's tape to this side to prevent tear out. I'm using a 1/4" Forstner bit. A little dab will do ya. Spread a little glue on the inside of the hole and insert the dowel. Let dry and add a bit of black paint and voila.
Now we are finally done. Got the pins in. The only thing left will be to take down the plastic, but you can see, really easy to spin it around. I have locking casters, so it will lock in place. Okay, now I know what Brett Favre feels like. Every time I tell you I'm done, I come back and show you something else. One last thing I forgot to tell you, magnetized. Remember the galvanized sheet metal we stuck between the two panes? We can now stick magnets anywhere up there. This time, I am done.